I dashed to the car, popping the boot and opening one of my cases, extracting the rifle that had served me so well in the Reaper's garden. I tossed Reva her gun and hooked my sword to my belt. Hercule jogged over, looking in the harsh light of day like he was getting over an illness. In a way, he was. I'm going to get some high ground and cover you. Hercule looked perplexed. What are we meant to do? Buy some time, negotiate, just keep them busy. Shaz and Hilsey joined us, breathing hard and worrying, panic clearly in their eyes. They won't negotiate. They're here to cause carnage, Shaz said, checking his shotgun over. All around us, the workers and their families took cover in sheds and homes. A few of them emerged holding shotguns and some old school rifles. Farmers and mechanics all. There wasn't a decent weapon for miles, and we hadn't come to equip an army. Okay, you two keep them busy. I'll try and invade their systems from a distance, see if I can shake them up. If they get too rowdy, I'll have to take the old-fashioned approach. I patted the 50 cal on the stock. What if they try and spike me again? Or any of them? Hercule motioned to the growing crowd of local freedom fighters. You two put yourselves front and center, I said, nodding at him and Reva. Keep their attention. I put in some Cyphers special programming in your system while I was in there. You should be immune to anything they throw at you. For now. Besides, she got upgraded ages ago. Reva looked at me, surprised. Since when? You were asleep. I was bored. Wait, what? Babe, bigger problems right now, I said, pointing to the rapidly growing dust storm. What about us? A young she-elf had emerged at the front of the crowd. The locals had encircled us while I was talking. I cast an eye over them. What about you? I didn't mean it to sound like an insult. But it did. We're not just going to stand here and let them raid us. There was a muttered reply of agreement and angry cries of defiance. Again, you mean? How'd standing up for yourselves work out last time? A few of them looked in the direction of the makeshift graves. Yeah, that's what I thought. Are you really thinking clearly, or do you just want revenge? Aren't you here to help us? I can't make you battle ready in 5 minutes. Fuck, I probably couldn't even do it in 5 weeks. It's not about the ability to pull a trigger and aim, it's a state of mind, it's experience. Many eyes looked in the direction of the approaching raiders, the faint noise of motors far off starting to make themselves heard. Once these guys see that people like me are here, they will run and hide and come back and waste you later. When negotiations fail, and they will, I'm hoping to have invaded their systems and fucked them up so bad that they can't come back. We just need to keep them talking. This isn't some old west showdown shit. There's no heroes here. There's just 3 hunters and a slim chance. We're not backing down, the she-elf said with a stern glare. I saw something in her eyes, something that wasn't going to relent. Grief. I sighed. Any of you got any combat experience? One of the older half-elves put her hand up. I was in the Air Force for a bit, saw a bit of action. She was holding her gun like she knew what to do with it. Shaz gave a shabby salute. Ex-army. Fine, you lot take your cue from them. That's if shit goes south. I held up a finger. I say when bullets start to fly. She's my representative. No one moves a muscle unless she gives the signal. I gestured to Reva. Can I get a link into that line? Hercule asked as I led the ragtag crew to the center of the yard space and started pointing to areas of cover. I nodded. I'll hook you up. Excuse me. I turned to look for the voice that had spoken softly but loud enough to be heard. A young boy, a human. As soon as I took a good look at him, I knew exactly what he was. There was a bit more space around him in the crowd, too. Tattoos snaked over his body. He had no augmentations, and those tattoos looked awfully familiar. What's up? What's the signal? I raised an eyebrow to Reva. Keep an eye on me. If I vanish all of a sudden, you lot open fire. He looked confused, but nodded anyway. I noticed he didn't have a weapon. Everyone dispersed into little groups, taking up positions in the areas that could provide some cover. I approached the youth. My visage was stern, my attitude was wary. I can't help but notice, you don't have a gun. He looked sheepish at first, then rallied. I don't need one. Don't tell me you're dumb enough to think you can control it. I inspected his tattoos. You're what? An Epsilon level threat? Delta, how'd you. What's your name? Sam. I looked over my shoulder at the incoming threat. And you think you can do what, exactly? I said, looking back and locking eyes with him. I can go partial shift. That was a dumb fucking idea, but I didn't have time to convince him. Despite his youth, there was conviction behind his eyes. He believed he could handle it. It was true that lower threat levels could sometimes pull it off, but they were usually Epsilon or Zeta. At least out here, DCP wouldn't come for him, even if they did notice he had changed. No one gave a fuck out here. If you start going for your own people, I'll put a hole in you the size of my fist. His mouth twitched, the hint of a snarl. He seemed more sullen than anything. That won't kill me. I shrugged. No, but it'll really fucking hurt, and it'll take you a couple of days to put yourself back together. He tried to stare me down, but he was a head shorter and about as intimidating as a daisy. I patted him on the shoulder and moved on. Just don't pull the pin too early. I gave River a kiss, then turned back to the sheds to pick a vantage point. Pickings were slim, but there was a spot over the med bay. I started to jog in that direction. Fearing I wouldn't make it in time, I fired up my Hermes for the last stretch. I made the roof, throwing myself down on the sheet metal to one side of the aircon stack. Okay, sound off. Beautiful butterfly? Hercule sighed, his voice tinny as it came over the comm unit. Do I have to be a butterfly? Yes. Babe, you there? Riva gave me a thumbs up. Loud and clear, as always. Showtime. The sound of motors had grown in volume as we'd settled into our positions, and they now roared in the air. They were coming in fast from the west. If I was any guess, they would position themselves between us and the sunset, hoping to have the bright glare at their back. But if we could keep them talking long enough, that wouldn't matter. Whatever they were driving were no ordinary vehicles, and sure enough, when the first vehicle skidded to a halt in the entrance of the site, I knew exactly how specialized they were. They had taken more than just the weapons and uniforms when they had been ejected from the service. The Harlequins had been a sizable mercenary group. They had fractured a bit, but they were now akin to the bikie gangs of old. Groups of them existed in a few key areas around the country. These guys were a small group. Either they had gone rogue from their main chapter, or they had been sent out solo. A specific task force designed and deployed for a particular mission. Either way, it was encouraging on my end. It meant that they were free agents, no one would come looking for them, and if they had been sent out solo, the main pack up north probably would wash their hands of them if shit went south. They had probably been paid for this. As long as the check had cleared, that's all that mattered. What was discouraging was the kit they had brought with them. 3 Obsidian-class cruisers and a heavy transport unit for making off with the stolen goods. Then 3 Outriders on VX Hellion all-terrain motorbikes. All of this came equipped with an array of augmentations. Shit, they could waste us right now if they wanted to, I said into the comm. Reva asked the obvious question. Why haven't they then? A thought struck me and I switched to my other sight. My eyes peeled back layers of tech and armor plating. Ever since my time in the garden, I felt like my sight was sharper. More definition was visible to me. Before, I could see vague shapes, ghosts of objects, even if they weren't electrically charged. But everything gave off low levels of power, even if it was extremely weak. And now, I was fine-tuned. Those ghosts were more clear than ever, and what they showed me was an extreme lack of ammunition for those big guns. The lead cruiser had a round in each forward gun ready, large, and they would make a statement, but only 2 rounds total. They were here to make a point if they had to, but the rest of the mag was empty. The other vehicles, though heavily armoured, were all sporting empty mags. Either they'd burned through them all in their previous encounters, or they hadn't had enough to bring with them in the first place. They must have no way of getting their hands on anything decent down here. I relayed this observation. They're packing fuck all under those hoods. Only the lead vehicle has 2 live rounds. I'll disable it first, keep them busy. I saw a slight nod from Hercule as the doors to the vehicles opened up and the Harlequins emerged, silhouetted by the orange light. Yep, they were exactly like I remembered them. True to their name, they were as showy as a damn circus and as crazy as they come. Fluoro multi-spiked mohawks, chrome augmentations, bright leather vests and boots. They had never been used for stealth missions, let's just say that. Don't let the showboating fool you. These guys might look like an unhinged peacock, but they're deadly. I could just make out, from Hercule's integrated mic, the speech of the leader as he addressed the group. Well, 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 what do we have here? Another pathetic attempt to put up a fight? You'll excuse me while I quake in my boots. That was exactly the attitude I'd expected. And how the fuck are you still walking, big shoots? Wouldn't you like to know? The leader made a point of looking around the yard. Got yourself a good circuit jockey at last? He eyed off Shaz, who stood behind the two greenskins. What you say there, boss? Who was in the car that rolled in a couple hours ago? He turned back to Hercule. Fucker worked fast, I'll give him that. I smiled. Good. Keep them guessing while I work. I trusted Reva's emotions to keep me abreast of the situation. I couldn't spare the attention to keep actively listening, but I'd feel if she gave anything off. I dived into the cyberspace, into my own mind, pulling up a display of all the signals I could potentially hijack. This was the real reason I was up here. I zeroed in on the signals from the car's piece of cake. I started to poke around for ways into the system that were the governing force of the lead cruiser. I kept my senses open for any counter hackers. Someone had loaded that virus into Hercule. They might have come light on kit, but no crew like this would go into action without their own jacker. The system was nothing I hadn't encountered in the field. It was advanced, don't get me wrong, but disabling it was like walking through a minefield with all the mines marked. It was a clear path. Still, you had to step carefully. I moved as quick as I could. Reva's emotions shifted by degrees, and I could tell I was on very borrowed time. At last, the big guns were offline. I didn't just disable them, I wrecked their targeting software, and quietly fried some circuits, leaving sneaky surprises for anyone who wanted to start those bad boys up. Dropping back into the real world for a moment, pushing the panels of menus and blocks of code to one side of my vision, long enough to see the leader laughing, his gun leveled at Hercule. Reva was oddly calm though. The guy was flexing, having fun, playing with his food. He still thought they had the upper hand. He was about to learn. I began to press in on his outer layers, gently probing so as not to alert him. Too late, I realized it wasn't him I needed to worry about. I knew I was being watched before they made their move, but I wasn't alert enough. I redirected all my attention to defensive measures in a heartbeat. There had been no communication signals in the air when they had rolled in, no blue tether lines showing someone keeping an eye on anyone else's systems. Whoever it was must have been checking intermittently. My warning systems started to throw up alarms. Oh good, they were trying to invade my system. Joke's on them, I didn't have a system to invade. It wouldn't take them long to realize that I didn't have a centralized system or NPU. If they were good, they would shift gears and try for independent corruption of my augments. No sooner had I thought it, and I saw the alert. Fuck me. They were good. They were a fast thinker. My next instinct was to drop my visuals and put a bullet through whoever had tethered themselves to me. I was able to trace the connection with my Cyphers site after all. They didn't give me a chance. Another alert and another shit. They were working fast, really fast, way faster than they had any right to. It was all I could do to throw ice at them with any level of precision. I was so used to going up against magic lately, purely my mind and will against someone else's, or having the luxury of taking time. I hadn't had a speed run on a fellow hacker in ages. I split my attention between the countermeasures and started to build an offensive strike of my own. As I've said, I have a lot of programs ready to roll. I wouldn't be a Cypher or even a hunter if I wasn't constantly prepared for shit like this. I hit send on the computing equivalent of buckshot. It wasn't a program that would be overly accurate, but it would put some pressure on them and buy me some time. I followed it up with assembling a chain of commands to initiate an extremely invasive burn program. It wouldn't just fry this freak, it would run down the lines they connected to their buddies and infect them too. Oh, come on! They had made it through my first line of defense. I barely thought the words when I felt my left arm go dead. That's not good. They'd just run a shutdown on one of my independent systems. It wasn't impossible, of course, but it had taken way less time than it should have. While they couldn't comatose me like they'd practically done to Hercule, all my limbs were cybernetic and could be individually invaded and switched off. Above anything else, if they took out my other arm, there goes our cover fire. I mentally scrambled to regain control of my systems, while I desperately rushed to initiate the contagion burn. Code was being corrupted before my eyes. I was fighting on too many fronts. Whoever this asshole was, they were a goddamn hacker prodigy. What the hell were they doing with the Harlequins was anyone's guess. You've got to be fucking kidding me. My other arm just went full blackout. This was not good on so many levels. How the fuck were they splitting their attention between so many tasks? Even the best hackers I'd ever met had been on par for trying to get inside a Cyphers system. Either they had more than one of them tucked away in that box of a bus, or, no, not even the Harlequins were that brazen. If word got out, I was left to tuck that thought away for future investigation if I ever walked away from this, which at the moment was looking increasingly unlikely. The only upside to this whole situation was I was pretty sure I had their whole undivided attention. There was almost no chance they were doing any work on anyone else. I was wrong. I heard someone cry out. I risked everything to look over at the real world. One of the locals, an old man, white hair and thin, was convulsing on the ground. His eyes leaking blood, his back arching in pain. The leader was laughing. You know what? I'll make you a deal. For every minute you don't stand aside, we'll fry one of your new friends. This asshole was just playing games now, enjoying the power trip. Typical. You could see it in the locals. They were practically shaking. I was impressed they were holding it back. They were still waiting for Reaver's signal. They were on the edge, though. Last chance, big shoots. Stand aside, or... A feral cry, somewhere between a howl and a scream of rage, cut off the Harlequin's words. Oh no. The young werewolf, Sam, had indeed gone partial shift. He had been crouched down next to the old man that had dropped. Now he was running full tilt at the leader, claws out, teeth bared, his face an awkward state between canine and human. Fuck my life. Reva blinked out of existence as soon as she saw what was happening, and Hercule threw himself to one side as the gunfire erupted. They were aiming at the werewolf. At best, it would slow him down. At worst, it would piss him off and he would go all the way. I couldn't spare any more seconds. The last thing I saw was Sam being peppered with shots as he closed in on the leader. I dropped back into the cyberspace battlefield of my own mind, just in time to find a virus upload in progress on my legs. This was just going from bad to worse. I had slowly been chipping away at the firewalls between my other tasks, and I finally blew open an entrance. I couldn't do anything to stop the virus on my legs though, it was too late. They shorted out, sparks flying, my jeans burning up in grey smoke. I tried to repress a cry of pain, and I just managed to hit send on the contagion burn. I dropped my view of the menus, opening my eyes to the real world through the veil of my other sight and the smoke issuing from my legs. A blue line of light shot directly from me to the heavy transport. Somewhere in there, someone was about to get cooked. I waited for seconds that seemed to drag out. Nothing happened. Then the passenger door of the vehicle was thrown open and a cyberdeck was ditched at the ground. It was sparking, and blue-grey smoke flowed in thick plumes. More smoke issued from inside the vehicle itself. At the same time, two of the thugs laying down cover fire practically burst into flames. There had been 2 more lines of connection from the vehicle to those two, so I knew that the burn had spread like it was supposed to. So, whoever had been battling me was routing themselves through a deck as a secondary line of defense. Smart. No one but their closest comrades had seen the two thugs go to fire. The battle raged on. Gunfire sprayed wild. Blood flew as Sam unleashed his primal nature, and stray shots put holes in the parked vehicles behind the defenders. I needed to get involved. I scrambled to reboot my arms, if nothing else. My legs were toast after that virus. They would have to take some serious work to get rebuilt. My arms, though, there was no lasting damage. They were just offline. Blocks were in place to stop the commands from executing. It took me a hot minute to reactivate them, but it did take all of my attention. I felt the startup process kick in, and I flexed my fingers. I was back in business, if immobile. Locomotion was for chumps, though. I had other ways of making an impact. All the menus cleared to one side. I leant in low over the stock of my 50 cal. I hadn't moved from my prone position through all this, and I certainly wasn't going to now. The scene below me was a war zone. All the Harlequins were using their armor-plated vehicles as cover. All the locals were huddled behind whatever they had to hand. The military trucks were far more bulletproof than the crates and the worksite utes that were serving as the defenders' cover. Several of them were down, injured, or dead. I wasn't looking close enough to see. Sam was on the ground now, writhing in pain. He'd been gunned down at last. Not dead, just out of action. The leader, for his part, was clutching his face and one leg as he crawled towards the transports, dragging his legs trailing blood. Well, time to start cleaning up. I pivoted the rifle slightly to the left, focused through the sight. One breath in, half a breath out. The leader's head exploded as he got the door open. Through the crack I could see the hint of pink and blue hair. More than anything, I wanted to see the face of the person who had just crippled me. They were staying put though, alive or dead, I wasn't sure, and I didn't have time to check. Firefights like this, though, are short once one side gets even a little bit of a leg up. Ironically, I was that leg. By the time they figured out where I was shooting from, I had laid out half their number. Sam was regaining his feet again and took out another attacker, if not a bit more slowly this time. Through all of this, Reva had made 2 runs into the front line and dispatched a few of the thugs with a handgun and knife. Hercule, still somewhat weak from his bed rest, had been laying down cover fire from his massive hand cannon, while the injured were moved into the medbay behind them. It became apparent that these were not the best of the best that the Harlequins had to offer. These were no veterans, no more than a couple of them at least. These were the new bloods, the greenhorns. They had been sent out to earn their stripes, as up until now it had been easy pickings, a laugh and some good old-fashioned violence. Well, guess what? Retribution was a bitch. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of pride at the judgment I rained down on them in the form of lead cones and copper jackets. I caught myself grinning as I put a shot through the neck of an orc desperately trying to reload. My own reaction to the violence pulled me up short. I could practically see my father's grin hovering in front of me. Smart-ass bastard. The tide had turned, though. The Harlequins had seen it too. I pivoted again as one of the motorbikes roared to life and an elegant, if not bloody, elf woman in a bright red jacket tried to tear away from the battlefield. That's a nice bike. I picked out her silhouette in the dust cloud as it trailed out behind her and allowed myself the grin this one time. Mine, I think. The kind of firefights that movies strung out for 20 minutes or half an hour were in reality pretty much over in under 5. Me though, I was stranded on the roof for at least half an hour, until someone managed to get a cherry picker with a sling. The indignation was even more emphasized when, for mobility, I was seated on top of one of the harvest drones. I looked like an upside-down bobblehead as I tried to keep my balance with its movement. I can't decide if you look more like a comic book villain or just stupid, Reva said, tilting her head to one side and inspecting the office chair that had been tack welded to the top of the drone. Cleanup was happening all around me. The medbay was full. Reva had been helping move the injured, but she was no doctor, so now she just stood there, judging me. How can a place like this not have a single wheelchair? I said with a grumble as I picked over the salvaged tech from the transport. My opponent, who had turned out to be a pink and blue pigtailed teen girl with more piercings than teeth, was completely fried from my attack. The metal casings that had protected her neurological augmentations were charred black, and her eyes were non-existent. Apparently, the cyber deck she had been routing through hadn't provided enough protection. I was right though, at such a young age, she was a damn hacker prodigy. What a waste. Speaking of waste, the cyber deck she had been using was pretty badly cooked too, but as I pulled the casings off, my worst fears were realized. I whistled. Reva came closer, leaning in for a better look. I thought she was too fast. Her consciousness was spread too thin. I held up the exposed insides of the tech for her to see. This explains it. She shook her head. What am I looking at? That would be an AI extremis drive. We both looked down. Hilsey had appeared next to me without us noticing. As in AI? The young circuit jockey had been so responsive. It was really the only explanation. It must have been a construct modelled off themselves and their own systems, completely bespoke programming these days to get that kind of tight synchronization. You mean they copied their consciousness into that box? Reva asked, amazed. But they needed to get that drive from somewhere, the gnome said, adjusting the bandages around his arm which hung in a sling. Between my sister and I'm pretty sure we can pick it apart and find something to give us a point of origin. But I'm not doing it without some proper gear in place. Who knows how volatile it'll be, if it really was a copy of Pigtails over there. But it's fried, Reva said. I shook my head. The deck is fried, the router and the jacker, but the AI lives in here. I scanned it with my other sight. It looks surprisingly untouched. I thought AIs were banned outright, Reva asked. That's putting it lightly, I said grimly. If raiding farms is an 8 on the scale of illegal activities, then using AI is about a 12. And that's not to mention that that's a law that's held in 182 countries, Hercule put in, approaching us. He handed over a slim data slate. Sorry to interrupt. I found a kind of manifest in the lead car. I put the AI to one side. I don't know any of these places, but you might. I looked it over. It was a series of dates and locations. It's intel on the farm, when and where is best to do the raids, and where to deliver the goods. I trailed off as I saw one address repeated over and over. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Thank you for listening to Cyphers Edge. Subscribe so as not to miss future episodes. New episodes uploaded every second Saturday. Script and narration by JJ Brandis. Music was provided by Cale McLeish. Copyright JJ Brandis 2025.